Frankel here, a member of Congress here in Palm Beach County, and we're here in West Palm Beach. I have some guests with me today who you're going to hear from Lonnie Wilk, Deputy Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League in Florida, Lawrence Milstein, Regional Director of the American Jewish Committee in Palm Beach, Dr. Elaine Rotenberg, Clinical Director, Albert Jewish Family Service, and we have some lovely women from Hadassah here today. So on October 7th of 2023, Hamas terrorists infiltrated Israel, brutally murdered 1,200 men and women and children, injured thousands, took 240 hostages. Over 100 still remain today, and this is day 102. And Israeli police has gathered thousands of testimonies of eyewitnesses of the Hamas brutality, including countless instances of rape, sexual violence, sexual mutilation, and they are continuing to gather this evidence. This is supported by photographic evidence, forensic medical units, and morgue workers who've identified bodies subject to mutilation and trauma consistent with sexual assault, rape, including shattered pelvises. And I'm not even going to go into some of the details that we have heard about. And even terrorists that have been captured by Israeli forces have admitted they were ordered by Hamas to carry out sexual violence against Israeli citizens. And I personally have met with hostages who have been released and their families, and they are also reporting instances of sexual abuse that is continuing on these poor hostages. We know that rape and sexual violence has been, unfortunately, a weapon of war throughout the history of the world. Unfortunately, this brutal violence by Hamas has basically been responded with a shrug worldwide in many quarters. So I'm here on behalf of literally hundreds of members of the United States Congress to declare unequivocally that rape and sexual assault as a weapon of war is unacceptable, it's inhumane, and that includes the acts of Hamas on October 7th that are continuing today. And today or tomorrow, depending on the weather, I guess, I'm going to be filing what is a bipartisan resolution. That means it is supported overwhelmingly by Democrats and Republicans across all philosophical bents. That we're going to condemn all forms of rape and violence as weapons of war, including those committed by Hamas on October 7th and since October 7th. This resolution calls on all countries to criminalize this type of behavior, and there are other parts of this, but the most important thing to emphasize is that we are making an official condemnation by the United States House of Representatives that the sexual violence by Hamas is inhumane, unacceptable, and we are condemning it. And there's no more shrugs. I'm going to bring up Lonnie Wilk now from the ADL.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Representative Frankel. I want to thank Representative Frankel for bringing us together this morning and for your initiatives and work in the House of Representatives to take a firm stand against the kind of violence, the sexual violence that was committed on October 7th and since October 7th by Hamas terrorists. It should be our knee-jerk reaction around the world when this kind of violence exists, when this kind of violence is targeting women is targeting children, it should be our knee-jerk reaction to meet that with empathy, to meet that with clear condemnation. It is outrageous that here we are more than 100 days since the attack, and we still have yet to see many in the international community use their voices. There has been a great deal of discussion in international bodies and here throughout the United States about the freedom of speech. We've seen anti Semitism run amok, and yet we've still had the discussions about freedom of speech. But freedom of speech works in all ways. Everyone, everyone in this country has their freedom of speech. And we need everyone to use their voice now more than ever to speak out strongly, to speak out firmly against any expression of bigotry, against any expression of violence, and especially against any expression in support of those who commit sexual violence like we have seen committed by Hamas. ADL has been tracking anti Semitic incidents here in the United States since 1979. Before October 7th, we were already at record levels of anti Semitic incidents in this country and in the state of Florida. And unfortunately, since October 7th, instead of seeing an outpouring of empathy, instead of seeing so many leaders come out and speak and use their voices against anti Semitism, against bigotry, we've seen anti Semitism run amok. We've tracked a greater than 350% increase in anti Semitic incidents. We have to put our foot down. We have to say, this will not continue. This is not who we are. So thank you again, Representative Frankel, for taking your firm stand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Representative Frankel.
Just reintroduce yourself.
Thank you very much for introducing this very important bipartisan legislation. On October 7th, the Iran-backed terror group murdered over 1,200 Israelis, including babies and children, kidnapped 240 people, and weaponized sexual violence during their terror rampage. In the weeks since October 7th, denial of these Hamas-perpetrated crimes has run rampant, despite verified evidence and testimony from survivors of the music festival, from the kibbutzim, and even freed hostages. These atrocities constitute gross violations of international law. Rape and sexual violence in conflict are war crimes. Israeli police have gathered evidence from more than 1,500 men and women in Israel who reported being sexually assaulted, who were witnesses to the sexual assaults, or whose sexual assaults have been actually documented by medical personnel. Additionally, forensic medical units have identified and photographed bodies subjected to mutilation and trauma consistent with sexual assault and rape, including shattered pelvises. Civil society groups have also documented and continue to archive testimonies and evidence they've collected. This bipartisan resolution condemns the deliberate use of gender-based violence against women and children in Israel during the October 7th attack, while also honoring the memory of the victims and demanding accountability for the perpetrators. The world must know the truth about these brutal atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th. We cannot turn a blind eye to the reality of Hamas's despicable and inexcusable actions, including sexual violence as a weapon of war. Thank you.
Where is our? There you are.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Elaine Rotenberg. I'm the Chief Clinical and Impact Officer at the Alpert Jewish Family Service. Thank you so much, Representative Frankel, for your leadership in introducing this bipartisan resolution condemning the rape and sexual violence committed by Hamas in its war against Israel. Alpert Jewish Family Service is now entering its 50th year of providing human services to our entire community. We were honored to be named the large nonprofit of the year in 2023. Alpert JFS has more than 24 programs and services helping thousands of individuals and families every year. Services including programs for seniors wanting to remain independent, as well as mental health services for adults and children, and services for the hundreds of Holocaust survivors that we see in our community. We've worked tirelessly to erase the stigma too often associated with mental illness, bringing mental health first aid to our community and surrounding counties, and for more than 20 years have been shining a light on the painful impact of domestic abuse, violence, and sexual violence on victims and their families. After the horrific terrorist attack in Israel on October 7th, Alpert JFS became one of the key first responders for our community. We've started several support groups that will continue to be offered as long as the need remains. We've responded to multiple calls from individuals relocating from Israel, those with increased anxiety and depression about their family and friends in Israel, as well as their own growing sense of dis-ease in the face of growing anti-Semitism. The barbaric sexual weaponization, including rape and sexual mutilation, that occurred on and since October 7th will forever have a traumatic impact on the victims and their families. Sexual assault strips a woman of her spirit and her core self, and in short, robs her of her emotional and psychological well being for the rest of her life. The assault will always be a part of her. The trauma will live on within her body and her mind. In order to physically survive such a brutal sexual attack, a woman must often separate her consciousness from the unspeakable reality that is occurring. This can result in extreme dissociation, depression, post traumatic stress, ongoing panic, and nightmares, whereby the victim never feels as she was before and is often cut off from any future feelings of joy or happiness. Since the trauma of the attack is embedded in her body and her psyche, the body remains a shell housing that trauma, never to be forgotten, and continues to haunt her for the rest of her life. And perhaps it should go without saying that the impact of that trauma on that individual extends to the victim's families and her community. Alpert JFS will continue to work tirelessly to support those impacted by the horrific events of October 7th. Thank you again, Representative Frankel, for demanding attention to these heinous, unspeakable crimes.
Thank you. Thank you all. Look, I think you've made it clear today. Congress is raising its voice, and we want the world to raise its voice. These acts must always be considered unacceptable, inhumane, and the perpetrators must be held accountable. And I thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions? You guys good? Okay. Yeah. Well, I think you can see, if you look at the faces of the people here, uh, sexual violence itself is one of the most inhumane acts that you can commit against a woman. And to use it as a weapon of war, it is almost, not only inexcusable, it's shocking, it's alarming, it's degrading, and as I said before, it's been met with a shrug around the world. You see all kinds of protests and letters and this and that. Where are the people saying this is wrong? Unless the voices are raised, and I want to say this, unless the voices are raised to condemn sexual violence as a weapon of war, unless the voices are raised to condemn Hamas for its acts on, and it's not only Israeli women, but men and children of sexual violence, unless it is the worldwide voice, it will not stop. It will not stop. And that's why it's so important. And here in South Florida, we're one of the largest Jewish populations in the country. And many have relatives and friends or themselves are from Israel. So it is very deep in our heart to be standing here and saying that we condemn these acts of violence. All right, got it?